grew up in foster care, shuffled from one family to the next. The longest I stayed with any one family was 2 years. They had multiple kids, made a good deal of money from keeping us. We lived on ramen and pickles while they feasted on roasted chicken and pork dips. A year before I ended up with that family, I lived with a satanic cult. When you think of Satanists, you probably think of people in all black with bad tattoos, stringy hair, and mean eyes. I did. I had no idea it was a cult until I heard the chanting late at night. These people wore khakis and long denim skirts. They had cheap haircuts and bare faces. They went to church and made casseroles for their neighbors. Little did the neighbors know what the casseroles were made of. The bodies had to disappear somehow. Maybe if the cult had hungry pigs, they could do it that way, like mobsters do on TV, but they didn't. They had Fat Pam down the street and depressed Bill, whose wife ran off with her lover and left him with 2 kids. Them? That's what people said when the truth finally came out. There were 5 total. One was a youth minister. Unremarkable people who committed unforgivable crimes. No one could have imagined, in their wildest nightmares, what was happening down in the basement of the house I was now living in. There was one other kid when I got there. I'd been there for a few months. I wasn't surprised or disappointed to be sharing a room. I didn't really have any feelings about it. Sometimes having another kid in the house made it less lonely. Sometimes not. Some of them were chaos while others kept to themselves. They knew they wouldn't be seeing you long, so they didn't get too close. Others were on their best behavior, hoping to become a permanent member of the family. The kid's name was Leroy. He was quiet and polite, but I never got the feeling he was trying to be a part of this family. I got the feeling he was scared. He tried desperately to make himself invisible by tiptoeing around the house, hugging the walls, never saying a word. The day before he disappeared, he looked shell-shocked, like the lone survivor of a plane crash. It was a hot night in July. You could hear the crickets outside. Beetles bumped against the window. "What's wrong?" I asked. He sat in bed, staring back at me. "Earth to Leroy." Without a word, he disappeared under the covers and turned his back to me. Whatever, I thought. I went to bed. The next morning when I woke up, he was already gone. My foster parents, Frank and Linda, continued life as normal. "Too much trouble." That's what Frank said when I asked about Leroy.
"A real hellion,"
added Linda. Leroy? The kid who always made his bed and cleared the plates? I couldn't believe it. Even though Leroy rarely spoke, I felt his absence when he was gone. I was a little sad. He never said goodbye, but I guess he never said hello either. Less than a month after Leroy left, a hitchhiker stayed with us for 2 nights. He could have slept in Leroy's bed, but he said he didn't feel comfortable with that, so he slept on the couch. That made me trust him more. Under his scraggly beard, I guessed him to be in his mid-30s, but after he bathed and shaved, I got a good look at him, and I was shocked. He was younger than I thought, maybe 25. His face was hardened from too many drugs and too many nights spent on concrete, but his eyes were lively. There was still some happiness and hope left in there. That evening, he ate 2 turkey sandwiches and 3 bowls of tomato soup. He was ravenous. Unfortunately, I know all too well what that's like. There comes a point when you're so hungry it feels like your stomach is eating your throat. It's painful. You become delirious and desperate. When Linda tried to take his empty bowl, he insisted on washing it himself, as well as all the other dishes. Linda wasn't having it. She was a good host, or at least wanted to appear that way. Frank asked him about his life. His name was Charlie. He didn't like to stay in any one place too long. His dad was a military man who loved teaching him lessons with a leather belt. His mom was a ghost haunting the house, drugged up on Klonopin, floating from room to room when she wasn't asleep. His sister was the only one who loved him, and he her. She was 16 now. He showed us a friendship bracelet made of purple and pink yarn. "Sis's handiwork." He beamed when he talked about her. This was his most prized possession. Never took it off. Not when he took a bath, not when he went to bed. He told us about the time a crazy guy tried to swipe it. "I busted his lip wide open, even though I'm a pacifist." There was a silence. Then Linda served some lemon pie. I found Charlie's bracelet in front of the basement door. What was it doing there? I pocketed it, my mind racing. I felt a presence behind me and turned around. Youth Minister Jim smiled down at me. His teeth were way too white and way too straight, and his smile never reached his eyes. He gave me the creeps. He talked to me about church and some other shit I didn't care about. All I could think about was Charlie. I thought he must be sick over having lost his bracelet. Would he be coming back for it? Of course not, but I didn't know that yet. There was a dinner party in full swing. These parties happened once a month. Youth Minister Jim went to the living room to join the others. The final 2 members of the cult were there, eating cheese and crackers. Kim and Drew, a childless couple in their 40s. Later I found out they couldn't have kids, but desperately wanted some of their own. With Kim's button nose and Drew's blue eyes, they prayed to the heavens for help, but God didn't deliver. So they turned elsewhere, and not to the fertility clinic. They couldn't afford it. Linda ushered them to the dining room. The night's meal was shepherd's pie. I didn't join. These dinners were for grown-ups only. I ate a ham sandwich alone in my room and drank the sweet drink Linda gave me. It would be at one of these dinner parties when I found out the truth. But it wouldn't be for another 2 months, and in that time, I didn't only find Charlie's bracelet, but other things as well, including a human tooth. Hard and small and a little yellow, I rolled it around in my palm. It looked like a piece of stained porcelain if it weren't for the silver filling in it. It was a tooth, unmistakable. Judging by the size, it was an adult's, but whose? Later, during breakfast, I stared at Linda's mouth as she spoke. She wasn't missing any teeth from what I could see, and neither was Frank. Frank gave me a curious look, but said nothing. I went back to eating my cereal. I kept all my findings hidden under my mattress. Charlie's bracelet, a fake red fingernail, a pink scrunchie, and now the tooth. Where did I find the other objects? I found the fingernail under a chair in the living room. I knew it didn't belong to Linda or Kim. They never wear nail polish, let alone fake fingernails. The pink scrunchie was lying right there near the trash bin. It certainly didn't belong to Linda. Her hair was too short. All these things were just lying around, carelessly, as if I was meant to find them. Or maybe Linda and Frank thought nothing of them or me. Maybe they thought they could explain it away, or I wouldn't even ask about it. And they were right. Of course I didn't ask. Instead, I waited for the end of the month, which is when the dinner parties took place. Youth Minister Jim was always the one who talked the most. He droned on and on about church and activities and all the young lives he was shaping. Kim ate a piece of cheese, nodding along, half listening. Linda was in the kitchen preparing the meal while Frank was off doing who knows what. She left me alone with Drew. Drew was the most boring man in every way. He was the cure for chronic insomnia. He didn't ask anyone any questions, ever. Mostly just talked about himself. His boring job managing the local Kmart and his lawn. He really loved taking care of and talking about his lawn for some reason. I guess it was his baby till he got a real one. My eyes were half closed. I could feel myself fading away from boredom when Linda came in. She ushered them to the dining room and sent me to bed with a sandwich and my usual sweet drink. I sat in bed looking at that drink. It was sweet with a bitter aftertaste. I realized that I always got this drink at every dinner party. I thought maybe it was meant to be my special treat. Of course, I was an idiot. I was a light sleeper all my life. Had to be with some of the places I stayed. It was a survival mechanism. If I heard the bedroom door creak open, I was ready to run. But after this drink, I never woke in the middle of the night or had the slightest sound, and I'd always feel well rested in the morning. I tossed the drink out the window, and I waited. Within the hour, I heard it. Faint chanting. With my ear to the basement door, I listened. I could barely make out the words. Tibi hoc corpus damis. Sounded like gibberish. I had no idea what it meant. I didn't need to know. I knew it was bad. I could feel it. Outside, the wind howled and the treetops thrashed. My shaky hand turned the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest like a jackhammer, and a tree branch smacked the window. I stifled a scream. Did they hear me? I stood frozen at the door, listening as the chanting continued downstairs. They didn't know I was there. I thought about calling the police or social services, but then I remembered what happened a couple years ago when I was living with a handful of other foster kids in a small house in the middle of nowhere. Our foster mother was a mean old woman who painted her eyebrows on too dark and smoked long, skinny cigarettes. One of the older kids, Julie, called social services on her for putting out lit cigarettes on some of the kids' arms as punishment. Social services came out for a visit. Our foster mother said Julie was not only a liar, but in fact it was Julie who put those cigarettes out on her brothers and sisters. Some of the other kids confirmed it, including me. We were all scared. I still feel guilty over it. Social services left, and that was that. A few days later, Julie ran away. Life was better on the streets than in a house like that. I was on my own now, just like Julie was then. Did Leroy feel alone too? I thought about his shell-shocked face. Had he seen or heard something? And did he ever really leave? What if he was down in the basement right now? Before I knew it, I was opening the door. As I crept down the stairs, I felt lightheaded and strange, like I was walking through a dream. There was a single lit candle. I stopped in the middle of the staircase and could make out 5 cloaked figures standing in a circle holding hands. Tibi, Hawk, Corpus, Demus. They passed around a butcher knife and one by one cut hidden parts of their bodies, thighs, torsos, upper arms. Then they smeared blood all over the floor and weird symbols. I gasped. One cloaked figure turned just as I retreated up the stairs. Whoever it was, they must not have seen me, because no one said or did anything. I was in the clear. Now I needed to come up with a plan. I think I have a fever. I coughed and squirmed in bed. Linda pressed her palm to my forehead. She frowned.
You do feel warm.
Minutes earlier, I had put a hot washcloth on my forehead. I can still go to church. I really wanna, but what if...
No, you stay in bed.
Linda gave me a warm smile. I coughed and gave her a weak one. Later, I listened as Linda and Frank went off to church without me. She brought me chicken soup in bed, but I flushed it down the toilet. Finally, I was alone. I immediately went for the basement door, but it was locked. I searched for the key everywhere, but never found it. Later, I learned Frank actually always kept it with him. Since I couldn't get in the basement, and because I knew if I called the police or social services, Linda and Frank could simply lie and they'd be trusted and I'd be screwed, I decided that they would have to be caught in the act. They wouldn't be able to lie then. So I looked for the drugs Linda put in my sweet drinks she gave me at every dinner party. It wasn't that hard to find. I found the pills in her bathroom medicine cabinet. A whole pharmacy, Xanax, Valium, Klonopin. I didn't know what any of it was at the time, but then I remember what Charlie said about his mom. She took Klonopin and she was a ghost hunting the house. And I also remembered how one of my foster dads always took Valium whenever he had to get on an airplane, and it always made him sleepy. I swiped a few Klonopins and a couple Valiums. At the next dinner party, I would find a way to crush them up and put it in the food. I watched as Linda drenched the top of it with ketchup. Red, gooey, thick. I grimaced. Looks good. I lied. Linda smiled. Where's Frank? I asked.
Had to get some crackers and cheese from the store.
Bullshit. There was Swiss cheddar and unopened pepper jack in the fridge and a whole box of crackers in the cabinet. I saw them earlier. She really must have thought I was a blind idiot. She finished drenching the meatloaf with ketchup. The entire top was covered in red. How was I going to put the crushed up pills in there? She was about to put it in the oven. What about onions? Bet it'd be good with onions. I tried to stop her. Linda ignored me and put it in the oven. I sighed, annoyed. Frank returned with a bottle of wine and a man I'd never seen before. None of them ever drank wine as far as I could remember, and who was this strange man? This is Tom. He needed a place to stay for the night. Frank introduced him to the rest of the group. They all shook Tom's hand. Tom smiled, grateful. He didn't look much different than Charlie, with his scraggly beard, but this guy's eyes were sad, and he was much older, gray and wrinkled. Linda took the bottle of wine and put it in the fridge. An idea sparked in my mind. I would put the pills in there when no one was looking. There was a cork stopping me from getting inside. I couldn't get it out. I jammed a fork in it. It got stuck. What was I gonna do now? Just then, Tom appeared. Linda asked me to grab more cheese. I turned around, startled, gripping the bottle. I just wanted to help. Tom knew I was lying, but to my surprise, he removed the fork and pop, he got the cork out with no problem at all. He gave me a look, then took a swig. Shh, he said, then he grabbed the cheese and went back to join the others. This guy was nothing like Charlie. I didn't trust him. I pulled a little Ziploc baggie of crushed pills from my pocket and carefully dumped it in the bottle of wine. I shook it up, watching the powder dissolve. Now, all I had to do was wait and hope they wouldn't pass out before they went to the basement. I sat in my room waiting for a lifetime. There was a slight commotion in the living room. Was it laughter or something else? I opened my door and peeked out, watching as the group carried a very drunk Tom down to the basement. It seemed like he drank most of the wine. After about 10 minutes, I heard the chanting. I crept to the basement door and listened. They didn't sound drugged or any different. I heard someone yell. Was it Tom? There was an eerie silence. I didn't want to see what was happening down in that basement. I knew my mind would never recover. What happened next was a bit of a blur. I know I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and cut my hand. Then I called the police. I told them Frank cut me and threatened my life. When the police got there, I pointed to the basement door. They went down there and discovered them all passed out. Tom had been stabbed multiple times, but miraculously, he survived. They were all hauled off to jail, and the town went crazy. A collarbone was discovered buried in the yard, but who it belonged to, no one knew. Maybe it was Charlie's or someone else's. Drew and Kim confessed immediately. They told the police about how they got rid of most of the bodies, the casseroles, and why they did it all. They had no remorse. It's not like anyone cared about the people they got rid of, according to them. As far as they were concerned, they were doing the world a favor. Charlie, of course, was one of the victims, but no one said a thing about Leroy. I hoped he made it out and was living with a good family. I spent years trying to find him, but never did. I never found out why Frank and Linda did what they did. Frank died of a heart attack on his way to jail, and Linda seemed to be in some kind of catatonic state. Looked a lot like Leroy the last time I saw him, shell-shocked. Never spoke again. Youth Minister Jim was the worst one of all, a real bad guy. Being a minister came with a certain amount of power and respect. He joined the church in hopes of poisoning the minds of today's youth so that he may eventually recruit them into a cult that he would lead. It wasn't going to be the cult he was already in. Frank was already the leader. So his plan was to create his own. He would get what he needed from Frank and take over the world. Youth Minister Jim ended up in a mental institution for the criminally insane. I see him from time to time. I'm a visiting psychiatrist there. His smile is the same, but his teeth are no longer straight or white. A few were knocked out in a fight. He doesn't recognize me, and sometimes I don't recognize myself. I feel like I'm stuck in a dream or a nightmare, but I guess that's what trauma is like. My patients sometimes tell me I seem to go away while talking, as if I'm in some kind of trance. They tell me I whisper what sounds like gibberish, Hebe, Hoc, Corpus, Demus. But I don't listen to what they say. I'm the doctor, they're the patient. I'm the one in charge now. Wow, what a story. That was a shorter one. I'm going to try to get this out to you early because we had the conversation about not wanting to hear repeat stories. No sleep stories are pretty viable to getting taken. So I'm going to try to get this one out for you when I can. So hopefully you're hearing this on Tuesday. If I was good, I'd get it to you on Thursday. But I don't think I can edit in a day. So here we are. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for all the input on all the posts. Thanks for enjoying. When I'm recording this, the last story that came out was the island story. I'm glad you all liked that one. I really loved it. So thank you so much for listening to this one. I will see you in the next one, or talk to you in the next one. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, just because the engagement helps me out and I want YouTube to give me more impressions. So, thank you so much. Much love. Ego, Volt, Anima, Vestra.